The wedding is off. I don't love you anymore." Brandon said it loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. The Saturday lunch crowd at the Italian bistro in Portland, Oregon, went completely silent. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes turning toward our table near the window, the one he had specifically requested when we arrived. I sat there for a moment, my fork still suspended over my plate of chicken parmesan. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. His friends at the adjacent table, the ones he had insisted join us for what he called a casual weekend lunch, were watching with barely concealed anticipation. My name is Megan, and I am 27 years old. At that moment, sitting across from the man I had spent 4 years of my life with, something inside me quietly shifted. It was like a lock clicking into place rather than breaking apart. I set my fork down gently. Brandon was watching me with an expression I had seen before, but never fully recognized until that instant. A mixture of satisfaction and anticipation, like a child waiting to see what happens when you pull the wings off a butterfly. "Thank you for being honest," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That was not the reaction he had expected. I reached down to my left hand and slowly removed the engagement ring, the one he had proposed with at his parents' anniversary dinner 2 years ago, making sure everyone was watching then too. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. "You know what?" I continued, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I think I am going to throw a narrow escape party." One of his friends snorted, and then a few others chuckled. Brandon's smirk deepened. He was enjoying this, I realized. He had choreographed this moment, chosen this setting, invited these witnesses, all so he could watch me crumble in public. But I did not crumble. "A narrow escape party," I repeated, more to myself than to anyone else. "Yes, I think that is exactly what this calls for." The laughter from his friend's table died down when they noticed I was not crying. I was not raising my voice. I was not causing a scene the way Brandon had clearly anticipated. Instead, I was reaching for my water glass and taking a slow, deliberate sip. "Megan," Brandon said, his voice carrying an edge now. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you perfectly," I replied. "You do not love me anymore. The wedding is off. I believe I already thanked you for your honesty." His jaw tightened. This was not going according to his plan. I pulled my wallet from my purse and placed enough cash on the table to cover my portion of the meal, plus a generous tip for the server who was probably going to have an interesting story to tell after her shift. "I have to say, Brandon, you picked quite a setting for this announcement," I said, standing up and gathering my things. "A crowded restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. Your friends conveniently here to witness everything. Very theatrical." His face reddened slightly. "I thought you deserved the truth." "And I got it," I said simply. "More truth than you probably intended to give me." I looked at his friends, Tyler, Josh, and Kevin, who were now exchanging uncomfortable glances. The amusement had drained from their faces, replaced by something that looked almost like confusion. "Gentlemen," I said, nodding toward them, "thank you for being here today. Your presence has been illuminating." As I walked toward the exit, I could feel the weight of every stare in that restaurant. But instead of shame or humiliation, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. 4 years. I had given Brandon 4 years of my life, and in one carefully orchestrated moment, he had shown me exactly who he was. Not accidentally, not in a fit of emotion, but deliberately. He had planned this public execution of our relationship, like a man planning a party. The autumn air outside hit my face, and I took a deep breath. My hands were not shaking. My eyes were dry. I walked to my car in the parking lot with measured steps, unlocked the door, and sat behind the wheel. Only then, in the privacy of my own vehicle, did I allow myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. But it was not devastation that washed over me. It was recognition. I had just witnessed Brandon reveal his true self, and the person he revealed was someone I did not want to marry. The realization was almost liberating. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Natalie. "How was lunch?" I stared at the message for a moment before typing back. "Wedding is canceled. I will explain later. But I am okay. Actually, I think I am better than okay." Her response came immediately. "What? I am coming over tonight." I put the phone down and started the car. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the restaurant one more time. Through the window, I could see Brandon still at our table. His friends gathered around him now. He was probably telling them I was in shock, that I had not fully processed what happened yet. He had no idea what was actually happening. He had just handed me the key to a door I had not even realized was locked. The drive home gave me time to think, and what I thought about were all the moments I had chosen not to see clearly over the past 4 years. I had met Brandon when I was 23, fresh out of college and working my first job as an assistant event coordinator at a conference center in downtown Portland. He was 25 then, a marketing associate at a pharmaceutical distribution company, confident and charming in that way that made you feel like the only person in the room when he focused on you. Our first date was at a coffee shop near the waterfront. He had listened intently as I talked about my dreams of eventually starting my own event planning business. He had nodded in all the right places, asked all the right questions. Looking back now, I realized he had been gathering information rather than genuinely connecting. By the end of our first year together, I had started adjusting my life around his preferences. He did not like my college friends, so I saw them less. He thought my apartment was too far from his office, so I moved to a place closer to his side of town. He said my dream of starting a business was risky, and I should focus on climbing the corporate ladder at my current job, so I put my entrepreneurial plans on hold. I told myself these were compromises. That is what relationships were about, right? Give and take. But the giving had been almost entirely mine. When I defended Brandon to my friends and family, I found myself making excuses I had heard other women make for partners who did not deserve them. "He is just stressed from work. He did not mean it that way." "You do not know him like I do." My mother had pulled me aside at Christmas last year, her eyes full of concern. "Megan, honey, does Brandon make you happy? Truly happy?" I had brushed off her question with a practiced smile. "Of course, Mom. We are getting married." But happy was not the word I would have used if I had been honest with myself. Comfortable, maybe, established, invested. I had put so much of myself into the relationship that the idea of it not working out felt like admitting to 4 years of failure. The engagement had come 18 months into our relationship. Brandon had proposed at his parents' 40th anniversary party, getting down on one knee in front of their entire extended family and social circle. I had said yes with 200 people watching, their phones recording the moment. What else could I say? That was when I should have recognized the pattern. Brandon loved an audience. He loved being the center of attention, loved moments that made him look good in front of others. The proposal was not really about us. It was about the performance. The wedding planning had been another series of compromises that only went one direction. I wanted a small ceremony with close family and friends. Brandon wanted a grand event with 300 guests, most of whom I had never met. I wanted a simple venue that reflected our personalities. Brandon wanted the most expensive hotel ballroom in the city, because that was where his business contacts expected people of his status to celebrate. Every time I pushed back, he had a way of making me feel unreasonable. "This is not just about you, Megan. This is about our future. The people at this wedding are people we need for our careers." Our careers. He meant his career. My job as an event coordinator did not require impressing pharmaceutical executives and their wives. But I had given in, again and again, because somewhere along the way I had stopped trusting my own judgment. Brandon had a talent for making his preferences seem like logical necessities, while my desires seemed like emotional indulgences. I pulled into the driveway of my apartment complex and sat in the car for a few more minutes, thinking about all the subtle ways he had enjoyed having power over me. There was the time he had corrected my pronunciation at a dinner party, making it seem like a joke, but ensuring everyone knew I had made a mistake. There was the way he would compliment me in public, but criticize me in private. My clothes, my hair, the way I told stories. There were the plans he would make without consulting me, and then act hurt if I expressed any frustration. And there was the money. Brandon made more than I did, and he never let me forget it. He paid for expensive dinners and vacations, but those gestures came with invisible strings attached. When I tried to contribute or suggest more affordable options, he would shake his head and say, "Let me handle it. You do not need to worry about money." What he meant was, "I control this. You do not get to make these decisions." I had been so focused on making the relationship work that I had not noticed how small I had become within it. The woman who had once dreamed of starting her own business now asked permission to go to lunch with her own friends. The woman who had once had strong opinions about everything now deferred to Brandon's judgment on nearly every decision. Sitting in my car, I felt the weight of those 4 years differently than I had just an hour ago. This was not the end of a love story. This was an escape route I had not known I needed. My phone buzzed again. It was Brandon. That was not the reaction I expected. "We should talk." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I did something I had not done in 4 years. I did not respond. That evening, Natalie arrived at my apartment with 2 bottles of wine and a look of fierce determination on her face. "Tell me everything," she said, settling onto my couch. "And I mean everything. Do not leave out a single detail." So I told her. About the restaurant, the announcement, his friends watching like spectators at a sporting event. About how he had requested that specific table, how he had insisted his friends join us, how the whole thing had felt staged from the moment we walked through the door. Natalie's expression shifted from concern to understanding to something that looked like vindication. "I knew it," she said quietly. "I knew something was wrong with that guy." "You did?" "Megan, I have been your best friend since freshman year of college. I watched you change over the past 4 years. The woman who used to argue with professors and stay up all night working on her business plan started asking permission to have coffee with me. Do you know how many times I wanted to say something?" I felt a flush of embarrassment. "Why did you not?" "Because you were not ready to hear it," she said gently. "And because I knew if I pushed too hard, he would use that to isolate you further. I was waiting for you to see it yourself." Her words settled over me like a weighted blanket. She had been watching, waiting, protecting our friendship by not forcing a confrontation I would have defended against. "The thing that bothers me most," I said slowly, "is that he planned it. This was not impulsive. He chose a public setting. He invited witnesses. He wanted to humiliate me in front of people." Natalie nodded. "He wanted to break you. He wanted everyone to see you fall apart so he could look like the one in control. But I did not fall apart." "No," she said with a small smile. "You did not. And I bet that is driving him absolutely crazy right now." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Brandon. "I think you are in shock. This is not like you. Call me when you are ready to have a real conversation." "What does he want?" Natalie asked. "He thinks I am in shock. He is confused that I am not begging him to reconsider." Natalie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course he is. Men like Brandon expect a certain reaction. They expect tears, desperation, bargaining. When they do not get it, they do not know what to do." I set my phone face down on the coffee table. His friends were laughing at first. When I removed the ring and said I was going to throw a narrow escape party, they thought it was hilarious, like I was some delusional woman who did not understand what was happening. What made them stop laughing? I thought about it for a moment. I think it was when I did not fall apart. When I thanked him for being honest and walked out with my head held high. They did not know how to react to that. Natalie poured us each a glass of wine and handed one to me. So, this narrow escape party, are you actually going to do it? The idea had come to me spontaneously in the restaurant, a deflection born from some instinct I did not fully understand at the time. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. You know what? I think I am, I said. But not for the reasons he probably thinks. Not to mock him or cause drama. I want to reclaim the narrative before he can rewrite it. What do you mean? Brandon is going to tell people his version of what happened. He is going to paint himself as the hero who had to end things with a woman who was not right for him. He is going to make me look pathetic or crazy or both. But if I throw a party celebrating my narrow escape, if I frame this as a positive thing that happened to me rather than something that was done to me, I take that power away from him. Natalie's eyes lit up. That is brilliant. You are not the jilted fiancée crying into her pillow. You are the woman who dodged a bullet and is celebrating her freedom. Exactly. We talked for hours that night, and with each passing hour, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Natalie helped me see things I had been too close to notice. The way Brandon's compliments always had conditions attached. The way his gestures of kindness came with expectations of gratitude. The way he had systematically separated me from people who might have challenged his influence. There is something else, I said as the evening grew late. Something about the way his friends were positioned at that restaurant. Tyler was filming on his phone. I saw it when I stood up to leave. Natalie's expression hardened. He wanted video. He wanted footage of you breaking down. The realization hit me like ice water. This was not just a public breakup. This was a production. Brandon had wanted documentation of my humiliation, something he could share, something that would cement the narrative he was trying to create. That is why he looked so confused when I did not cry, I said. He was expecting a specific reaction, something that would make good content. Content for what? I did not have an answer yet, but I knew there was more to uncover. Brandon had planned this too carefully for it to be just about ending our relationship. There was something else going on, some deeper motivation I had not yet discovered. I need to find out why, I said quietly. Not so I can change anything that happened, but so I can understand what I was really dealing with. Natalie squeezed my hand. Whatever you find, I am here, and for what it is worth, I am proud of you. The woman I saw today at that restaurant, that is the woman I have been waiting to see for 4 years. I looked at her, at this friend who had stood by me even when I had not been able to stand up for myself, and I felt the first real stirring of something that might have been hope. Tomorrow I would start digging. Tonight, I would rest. The next few days were filled with messages from Brandon that grew increasingly confused and then agitated. Sunday morning. Megan, this silent treatment is immature. Call me. Sunday evening. I did not do this to hurt you. We need to talk like adults. Monday. People are asking me what happened. You need to help me explain this properly. Tuesday. I heard you are telling people you are throwing a party. What is that about? Are you trying to embarrass me? I did not respond to any of them. For the first time in 4 years, I was not arranging my actions around Brandon's comfort or expectations. The silence felt powerful in a way I had not anticipated. In the meantime, I began the practical work of untangling our shared life. The wedding had been scheduled for the following April, 6 months away. We had deposits on a venue, a caterer, a photographer, a florist, all under my name, because Brandon had insisted it made the paperwork simpler, though I now suspected it was because he did not want his name attached if things went wrong. I called the venue first. The coordinator, a woman named Patricia, who I had worked with several times during my career, was sympathetic when I explained the situation. The deposit is non-refundable, she said apologetically. But under the circumstances, I can offer you a credit for any future event you might want to host. Actually, I said, an idea forming, I might want to use that space sooner than expected. Would next month work? Patricia sounded surprised but intrigued. What kind of event are you planning? A celebration, I said, of new beginnings. The caterer was similarly understanding. The photographer offered to refund half the deposit as a gesture of goodwill. The florist, who had become a friend over the months of planning, said she would happily provide arrangements for whatever I was planning next. No charge for labor. Each conversation reinforced something I had begun to realize during those endless planning sessions. The people I had been working with had seen something I had missed. When I told them the wedding was canceled because my fiancé had ended things, more than one of them responded with variations of, "I am sorry to hear that, but honestly, I wondered how long it would last." "What do you mean?" I asked the florist, Dominic, whose shop was downtown and who had been helping me source sustainable arrangements. "Megan, every time you came in here you were stressed and apologetic. You kept changing things because he wanted different flowers, or different colors, or different quantities. Most brides make changes, but you seemed like you were trying to please someone who could not be pleased. That is not how wedding planning should feel." His words stayed with me long after I hung up the phone. By Wednesday, I had a clearer picture of what the next few weeks would look like. The narrow escape party would happen at the same venue where the wedding reception had been planned, using the deposit that was already paid. The date would be 3 weeks from Saturday, enough time to plan, but soon enough that the story would still be fresh. I started making a guest list, and that was when things got interesting. Brandon and I had planned the wedding together, which meant I had access to all our shared documents, including the master guest list. As I scrolled through the names, I noticed something that made me stop. There was a separate list, a list I had not created and had never seen before. It was titled Priority Notifications and contained about 40 names. Brandon's friends, his colleagues, some family members I barely knew. Next to each name was a note. Wedding update. Send immediately. I clicked on the document history and felt my stomach tighten. Brandon had created this list 2 weeks before that Saturday lunch. 2 weeks before he ended things. He had been planning his announcement for at least 14 days. The separate list suggested he had prepared a specific message for these people, something he wanted them to receive immediately after the breakup. I dug deeper into our shared files and found a draft of the message he had planned to send. As some of you witnessed today, I made the difficult decision to end my engagement to Megan. This was not easy, but I realized I could not commit to a future with someone who was not aligned with my values and goals. I appreciate your support during this time, and hope you will respect my need for privacy as I move forward. The message painted him as thoughtful and decisive. It made me sound like the problem, someone with misaligned values and goals. It was spin, carefully crafted to control how people would perceive the breakup. But there was more. In his sent folder, I found messages to his friends from that morning, before we even arrived at the restaurant. Today is the day. Meeting at the bistro at 12:30. I want you there to witness. This is going to be good. And Tyler's response. Finally, been waiting for this. I will record everything. They had planned it together. His friends were not innocent bystanders who happened to be there. They were co-conspirators in a deliberate public humiliation. My hands were shaking as I continued reading. Another message, this one to someone named Rebecca, sent the night before. Tomorrow I am ending things with Megan. I know you have been patient. I cannot wait to be free and start our new chapter. Rebecca. I did not know a Rebecca, but apparently Brandon did. Apparently Brandon knew her well enough to have been communicating about a future together while he was still engaged to me. I sat back from my computer, absorbing what I had discovered. This was not just a breakup he had planned. This was a coordinated campaign. He had a replacement ready, an audience assembled, a narrative prepared, and a desire for documented evidence of my breakdown. The only thing he had not planned for was me refusing to break. My phone buzzed with yet another message from him. I do not understand why you are ignoring me. This is not healthy behavior. For the first time since Saturday, I typed a response. I am not ignoring you. I am just no longer interested in having conversations that serve your needs at the expense of my own. I think we are done communicating. His reply came almost instantly. That is cold. I expected more from you. I turned off my phone and returned to the documents I had found. There was more to uncover, and I was going to find all of it. The more I investigated, the clearer the picture became. Brandon had been planning his exit from our relationship for months, not weeks. The evidence was scattered throughout our shared documents and accounts, breadcrumbs that told a story I had been too trusting to see. Rebecca was not a recent development. Through careful examination of phone records we shared for our family plan, I discovered they had been communicating since early summer, 5 months before Brandon's public announcement. The calls started short and infrequent, then grew longer and more regular as the months progressed. I did not have access to the content of their messages, but I did not need them. The pattern was clear enough. Brandon had been cultivating a new relationship while still engaged to me, and the public breakup was not an ending. It was a transition. But understanding the affair was only part of the puzzle. What I still did not understand was why he had chosen such a public setting to end things. If he wanted to leave me for someone else, he could have done it privately. The theatrical nature of the breakup suggested something more deliberate. The answer came from an unexpected source. Natalie called me Thursday evening, her voice tight with controlled anger. I just heard something you need to know. One of my coworkers is friends with Tyler's girlfriend, and apparently there has been a lot of talk in their circle about what happened Saturday. What are they saying? According to this woman, Brandon had been telling his friends for months that you were emotionally unstable. He said you were clingy, controlling, that you threw fits when you did not get your way. He told them he was afraid of what you might do if he tried to end things privately. I felt the air leave my lungs. That is not true. None of that is true. I know, Natalie said firmly. But that is the story he has been building. The public breakup was not just for show. It was designed to create witnesses. He wanted people to see you react so he could point to it as evidence of your instability. But I did not react the way he expected. Exactly. And that is why he is panicking now. His whole plan depended on you having a meltdown in front of everyone. When you did not, his story stopped making sense. I remembered Tyler with his phone, filming the whole encounter. He wanted video proof that he was right to leave you. Video proof that you were exactly as unhinged as he had been describing. Instead, he has footage of you calmly thanking him and walking away with dignity. The manipulation was more elaborate than I had imagined. Brandon had not just planned a breakup. He had constructed an entire narrative designed to make him look like a hero escaping a difficult situation. Every element was calculated. The public setting, the witnesses, the recording, the pre-written messages to his network. And I had accidentally destroyed the whole thing by not playing my assigned role. There is more, Natalie continued. Tyler's girlfriend said Brandon has been scrambling this week. He is calling people, trying to explain why you did not react the way he said you would. He is telling them you are in shock, that the breakdown is coming, that people just need to wait. He needs me to fall apart. He needs you to prove him right. Right now, you are making him look like a liar. After I hung up with Natalie, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and thought about all the times over the past 4 years when Brandon had told me what other people supposedly thought of me. My friends think you are too intense. My mother thinks you're not ambitious enough. My colleague said you seem distant at parties. I had absorbed those comments, adjusted my behavior, tried to fix problems that might not have existed. It never occurred to me that Brandon might have been the one creating those perceptions, poisoning opinions, building a case against me brick by brick. The scope of his deception was staggering. This was not a relationship that had simply failed. This was a relationship where one person had been systematically manipulating the other, while preparing an exit strategy designed to destroy her reputation. But here was the thing Brandon had not counted on. I still had access to everything. Our shared documents, our shared accounts, our shared history of communication. In his arrogance, he had never thought to lock me out. He had assumed I would be too devastated to do anything practical, too consumed by grief to examine the evidence he had left behind. He had underestimated me. Maybe he had been underestimating me for 4 years. I pulled out my laptop and began organizing everything I had found. The timeline of his affair, the messages to his friends planning the public breakup, the draft announcement designed to control the narrative, the phone records showing months of communication with Rebecca. I was not going to expose all of this publicly. That would make me look vindictive, would give him ammunition to continue his narrative of instability. Instead, I was going to do something more subtle and more powerful. I was going to let the truth speak for itself. The narrow escape party was not going to be about Brandon at all. It was going to be about me, my freedom, my future, my right to define my own story. But if certain pieces of information happened to come to light in the process, well, that was just the truth finding its way into the open. I started drafting the invitation. It would not mention Brandon by name. It would not reference the breakup directly. It would simply invite people to celebrate a new chapter in my life, to mark the closing of one door and the opening of another. The guest list would include my real friends, my family, my colleagues from work, but it would also include some of the people Brandon had been cultivating as witnesses to my supposed breakdown. Let them see me thriving. Let them compare the woman he described with the woman standing in front of them. And if any of them asked what happened, I would tell them the truth. Not an exaggerated version, not a vengeful rant. Just the simple, documented facts of what Brandon had been planning and why. The truth, I realized, was my most powerful weapon. I did not need to embellish or dramatize. Brandon had done all the damage himself. I just needed to let people see it clearly. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity that kept my mind focused on practical matters, rather than emotional spiraling. I threw myself into planning the party with an energy I had not felt in years. The event coordinator training I had received in my early career proved invaluable, as I transformed the wedding venue deposit into something entirely different. Instead of white tablecloths and floral centerpieces designed for a traditional reception, I arranged for bold colors and eclectic decorations that reflected my actual taste, the taste I had suppressed for years to match Brandon's more conservative preferences. The guest list expanded as word spread through my genuine friend network. People I had lost touch with during my relationship with Brandon started reaching out, having heard through mutual connections that something had changed in my life. My college roommate, Elena, called from Boston. "Megan, I just heard you called off the wedding. Are you okay?" "I did not call it off," I corrected gently. "Brandon ended things, in the middle of a restaurant, in front of witnesses." There was a pause. "He did what?" "It is actually fine," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. It was the best thing that could have happened, even if he did not intend it that way. Elena was quiet for a moment. "I am going to be honest with you. I was dreading that wedding. Every time I talked to you over the past few years, you seemed smaller somehow, less like yourself. I kept hoping you would wake up and see what was happening." Her words echoed what Natalie had said, what Dominic the florist had implied, what the photographer and the caterer had hinted at. How many people had been watching me shrink and said nothing? "Why did no one tell me?" I asked, not accusingly, just curious. "Because you would have defended him," Elena said simply. "You would have explained away whatever we said and pulled away from us instead. We were all waiting for you to be ready." Ready. That word kept coming up. I had not been ready until Brandon himself had shown me who he really was, in a setting so public and so calculated that even my conditioned instinct to make excuses for him could not survive it. The invitation design came together quickly. It featured a simple image of an open door with light streaming through, and the text read, "You are invited to celebrate a new beginning with Megan. Please join me as I step into the next chapter of my life." No mention of Brandon, no reference to canceled weddings or escaped engagements, just forward motion. But underneath the celebration, I was also quietly preparing something else. I had been thinking a lot about the people who would be at this party. My real friends would come to support me, but I knew word would also reach Brandon's circle. Some of them would be curious, others suspicious. A few might even report back to him about what they saw. I wanted them to see a specific version of me, not broken, not bitter, but genuinely thriving. I wanted them to see the disconnect between Brandon's descriptions of unstable, clingy Megan and the confident, composed woman hosting her own celebration. But I also wanted them to hear the truth, if they asked. I prepared talking points in my mind, not scripted responses, but clear, factual summaries of what had happened. If someone asked why the wedding was canceled, I would explain calmly that Brandon had ended our relationship publicly, at a restaurant, surrounded by friends he had invited specifically to witness my reaction. If they pressed for details, I would mention the pre-planned messages, the recording, the affair he had been conducting for months. I would not volunteer this information unprompted. I would not turn the party into an exposé. But I would not hide from the truth either. If people wanted to know what really happened, I would tell them. The venue coordinator helped me finalize the arrangements. The date was set for the third Saturday of October, exactly 3 weeks after Brandon's public announcement. The guest list reached 70 people, a mix of friends, family, and colleagues who had watched me lose myself over the past 4 years. My mother flew in from Denver 2 days before the party. She took one look at my face and burst into tears. "Mom," I said, hugging her. "I am okay. Really." "I know," she said, wiping her eyes. "That is why I am crying. I have been so worried about you, and now I can finally see my daughter again." She helped me with the final preparations, and we talked more honestly than we had in years. She told me about the concerns she had harbored, the conversations she and my father had about whether to intervene, the painful decision to wait and let me find my own way out. "I prayed for something like this," she admitted. "Not the humiliation part, but the clarity. I wanted you to see him for who he really was." "Well," I said, "he certainly showed me." The night before the party, I received one final message from Brandon. It was longer than the others, more desperate in tone. "Megan, I have been hearing things about this party you are planning. People are talking. I think you are making a mistake. Whatever you are planning to say about me, please remember that I have my own side of the story. I have been patient, but if you try to make me look bad, I will have to respond. Think carefully about what you are doing." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. He was scared. He could feel the narrative slipping away from him, and he did not know how to get it back. For months, he had been building a story about unstable, dramatic Megan, but the woman people were seeing now did not match that description. I went to bed that night with something I had not felt in a long time: anticipation. Not dread, not anxiety, not the constant undercurrent of trying to predict someone else's reactions and adjust accordingly. Just simple anticipation for what was coming next. Tomorrow, I would stand in front of the people who mattered to me and celebrate the end of something that never should have begun. Tomorrow, I would let the truth do its own work while I focused on moving forward. Brandon had planned my downfall with meticulous care. What he had not planned for was my rising. The invitations went out on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, the phone calls started. People who had been at that Saturday lunch were reaching out to mutual acquaintances, trying to understand what was happening. The invitation itself was innocuous, just a celebration of new beginnings, but combined with the rumors that had been circulating, it raised questions. Tyler's girlfriend texted a friend who texted Natalie, wanting to know what exactly I was planning. Kevin's wife called my coworker, fishing for information about my state of mind. Even people I barely knew were suddenly interested in attending, curious to witness whatever was going to happen. Brandon, meanwhile, was scrambling. I heard through multiple sources that he had been calling people all week, trying to get ahead of whatever story he thought I was going to tell. He was framing the party as evidence of my instability. Who throws a celebration 3 weeks after being publicly dumped? He insisted I was having some kind of breakdown, that this was a cry for attention, that people should not encourage my behavior by attending. But his warnings had the opposite effect. Every person he called became more curious about what was actually happening. And when they compared his frantic explanations with the calm, confident woman who had walked out of that restaurant, the math did not add up. The day before the party, I received a call from someone unexpected. Brandon's younger sister, Addison. "Megan," she said hesitantly, "I heard about what happened, and I heard about this party. I wanted to check in." Addison and I had never been close. Brandon had kept me at a distance from his family, I now realized, but she had always been polite during our interactions. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said carefully. "I do not know everything that happened between you and my brother," she continued. "He has his version, and I am sure you have yours, but I wanted you to know that I never believed what he said about you." "What did he say about me?" There was a pause. "That you were difficult, emotional, that he was afraid to end things because of how you might react." She took a breath. "But Megan, I watched you at family events for 4 years. You were never any of those things. You were accommodating to the point of disappearing. I used to wonder why you never pushed back on anything." Her words struck something deep in my chest. "I did not push back because I thought that was what love looked like." "I know," she said quietly. "And I am sorry none of us said anything sooner. My mother has been asking questions this week, and I think she is starting to see things differently too." After we hung up, I sat with the conversation for a long time. Addison's call was the first crack in Brandon's carefully constructed wall. If his own sister was questioning his narrative, how many others would follow? The party venue looked beautiful when I arrived Saturday morning to do a final walkthrough. The hotel ballroom had been transformed from what would have been a traditional wedding reception into something vibrant and personal. The colors were warm and bold, deep oranges, rich purples, touches of gold. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, and the centerpieces featured sunflowers and wildflowers instead of the sterile white roses Brandon had chosen for the wedding. My mother found me standing in the middle of the room, taking it all in. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said. "I feel free." The guests started arriving at 7 p.m. Natalie was there first, followed by Elena, who had flown in from Boston, and then a steady stream of faces I had not seen in years. College friends I had lost touch with, co-workers from my early career, cousins and aunts who had always supported me, but whom I had kept at arm's length during my relationship with Brandon. Each arrival felt like a homecoming. These were my people, the ones I had pushed away or neglected because Brandon had convinced me they did not understand our relationship, that they were negative influences, that I needed to focus on building our shared life instead of maintaining individual connections. They had come back. Despite everything, they had come back. By 8 p.m., the room was full, and the energy was exactly what I had hoped for. Warm, celebratory, genuinely joyful. People were laughing and reconnecting and asking about my future plans. And then the questions started. "So what really happened?" Elena asked, pulling me aside. "The story Brandon has been telling does not match the woman I see standing here." I took a breath and told her the truth. About the planned breakup, the prearranged witnesses, the recording, the affair with Rebecca that had been going on for months. I showed her the screenshots I had saved, not publicly displayed, but available for anyone who asked. Her face went through several expressions as she absorbed the information. That is sociopathic, she finally said. He literally planned your public humiliation. He did, I agreed. But he also miscalculated. He expected me to fall apart, and I did not. Word spread through the party faster than I had anticipated. By 9 p.m., clusters of people were having intense conversations. Phones were being passed around showing screenshots, and the narrative was shifting in real time. I did not have to do anything dramatic or vengeful. I simply answered questions honestly when asked and let the evidence speak for itself. The turning point came when Kevin's wife, Jennifer, approached me. She had been one of the women at that Saturday lunch, seated at the table with Brandon's friends, watching the whole thing unfold. "Megan," she said, her voice strained, "I owe you an apology." I waited, not sure what to expect. When Brandon told us what he was planning, Kevin made it sound like an intervention. He said Brandon needed to get out of an unhealthy relationship and that having friends there would support him. I did not know about the recording. I did not know about the affair. I thought we were helping a friend escape a bad situation. "And now?" I asked. "Now I feel sick," she admitted. "I was part of something cruel, and I did not even realize it. The way you handled yourself that day, I kept thinking about it all week. You were so calm, so composed. That is not how someone acts if they are as unstable as Brandon claimed." Jennifer was not the only one having revelations. Throughout the evening, I watched as the story Brandon had carefully constructed began to collapse under the weight of evidence and eyewitness reevaluation. Tyler, who had recorded the whole breakup, was apparently being questioned by his girlfriend about why he had participated. Josh, another of Brandon's friends, had stopped responding to Brandon's messages entirely. The social circle that had gathered to witness my humiliation was now distancing itself from the man who had orchestrated it. And then, around 10 p.m., Brandon himself showed up. I saw him before he saw me, standing at the entrance of the ballroom, scanning the crowd with an expression of barely contained fury. He was wearing the button-down shirt I had given him for his birthday, which felt like either a coincidence or a deliberate provocation. The room did not exactly go silent when people noticed him, but the energy shifted. Conversations lowered. Eyes tracked his movement as he made his way toward me. "Megan." His voice was tight. "What do you think you are doing?" I turned to face him fully, keeping my expression neutral. "I am hosting a party, Brandon. You were not invited." "You are trying to destroy me," he hissed. "You are telling people lies, showing them fabricated evidence." "I have not told anyone anything that is not true," I said calmly. "And everything I have shown people came from our shared documents. Documents you created." His face went pale, then red. "You went through my files?" "Our files," I corrected. "The same ones I have always had access to. The same ones you never thought to secure because you assumed I would be too devastated to think practically." Around us, people had stopped pretending they were not listening. Jennifer was watching with wide eyes. Elena had her phone in her hand, clearly recording. "This is insane," Brandon said, his voice rising. "You are insane. This is exactly what I told everyone. You are unstable. You are vindictive." "Brandon." I held up my hand. "Look around this room. Look at the faces of people who know me, who knew me before I met you. Do I look unstable to you? Do I look vindictive?" He looked. What he saw was a room full of people watching him with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. "You planned my public humiliation," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "You had your friends film it. You had messages ready to send before the lunch even started. You were having an affair with someone named Rebecca while you were still engaged to me. All of this is documented. All of this is true." "You do not understand," he started, but the words had no conviction behind them. "I understand perfectly," I said. You wanted me to break down so you could point to it as justification for leaving. When I did not cooperate with your narrative, you lost control of the story. And now, you are here, uninvited, proving to everyone in this room exactly who you really are. The silence that followed was devastating. Brandon looked around at the faces of people he had tried to manipulate, people who were now seeing through the careful facade he had constructed. Then he turned and walked out. The party continued after Brandon left, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a sense of collective exhale, like everyone had witnessed something significant and was processing it together. People kept coming up to me throughout the rest of the evening, some to apologize for believing Brandon's stories, others to express admiration for how I had handled the confrontation. I accepted their words graciously, but what I felt most was not triumph or vindication. I felt peace. The band I had hired started playing, and the dance floor filled with people I loved. My mother was dancing with my uncle. Natalie was teaching Elena some ridiculous move from our college days. Colleagues from work were mingling with cousins I had not seen in years. This was what my life could look like going forward. Not smaller, not diminished, not arranged around someone else's expectations. Expansive, connected, real. The party wound down around midnight. As the last guests were leaving, Elena pulled me into a long hug. "I knew you would find your way back," she said. "I just did not know it would happen like this." "Neither did I admitted, but I am grateful it did." Over the following weeks, the fallout continued to ripple through Brandon's life. His carefully curated professional image took significant damage as the truth spread through networks of mutual acquaintances. Rebecca, the woman he had been having an affair with, apparently ended things after learning the full extent of how he had treated me. Tyler and Josh quietly distanced themselves, and Kevin's wife Jennifer filed for divorce 3 months later, citing the incident as a catalyst for reevaluating her own relationship. As for Brandon himself, I heard through various sources that he struggled to rebuild his social standing. The persona he had constructed, successful, principled, the victim of an unstable ex, had been thoroughly dismantled. People remembered how he had shown up uninvited to my party, how his accusations had crumbled under the weight of evidence, how the calm woman standing before them had not matched his descriptions at all. I did not track his downfall closely. Once the party was over and the truth was out, I found I had very little interest in Brandon's life. My focus had shifted entirely to my own future. The event planning business I had dreamed about for years finally started to take shape. I left my job at the conference center and began building something of my own, something that reflected my actual vision rather than someone else's idea of what was practical or safe. Within 6 months, I had my first clients. Within a year, I had more work than I could handle alone. The relationships I had neglected during my time with Brandon slowly rebuilt themselves. Friendships that had faded found new life. Family connections that had grown distant became close again. I learned that the people who truly loved me had never stopped. They had simply been waiting. And I learned something else too. The version of myself that Brandon had tried to create, the small, accommodating, controllable woman who asked permission and apologized constantly, that was never who I really was. It was a costume I had worn because I believed that was what love required. Real love, I discovered, did not require me to shrink. Real love celebrated who I actually was. Standing in my new office on the 1-year anniversary of that Saturday lunch, I thought about how differently everything had turned out than Brandon had planned. He had intended to break me publicly, to document my destruction, to use my pain to justify his choices. Instead, that moment in the restaurant had become the beginning of everything good that followed. The woman he tried to humiliate had become someone stronger than either of us expected. Brandon never fully recovered from the exposure of his true character. The pharmaceutical company he worked for quietly restructured his department 6 months after the party, and he was among those let go. His professional network, once a source of pride, became a liability as the story of what he had done continued to circulate. The last I heard, he had moved to another city entirely, trying to start fresh somewhere no one knew his history. Meanwhile, his former friends faced their own reckonings. Tyler's girlfriend left him after learning the full extent of his participation in the public humiliation scheme, and Kevin's marriage collapsed under the weight of the questions Jennifer started asking about what else her husband had been complicit in. As I locked up my office that evening and stepped into the cool autumn air, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I had been sitting in a restaurant watching the man I thought I loved announce to a room full of strangers that he did not want me anymore. I had felt every eye on me, had felt the weight of expectation that I would crumble, had felt the entire world waiting for me to fall apart. Instead, I had smiled and thanked him for his honesty. That moment, which Brandon had designed as my destruction, had become the first step toward my freedom. Looking back now, I realized I would not have changed a single thing. The narrow escape party had not been about revenge at all. It had been about taking my life back and never apologizing for being exactly who I was meant to be.